try to get through all of them. I don't know, there's a lot of faces here that I've never seen before. So thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it. This is a Working Families listening session so that people who work during the day have a chance to come after work and join us for a listening session to be held after hours. Because I'm sure many of you notice that sometimes Congressman Ryan holds his listening sessions during the day when people at work and don't have a chance to have their voice heard. So, I'm working really hard to be a representative, and I want to have a good idea of what it is that people in Janesville, Rock County, all across the district, what the issues are that are so important to them that they want to be heard and feel like they have a voice. So thank you all so much for taking the time to come out. We do have pizza and salad and beverages on order. I think it's going to be here probably half hour, 45 minutes. We'll take a break, everybody get something to eat, and then we'll finish up at 8:30. So, is there anybody here who has never heard of me or doesn't know anything about me? Do I need to go through my history and my background? No? Okay. Well, I did run for Congress in 2012. Did really well. It was the first time Paul Ryan had been elected with less than 55% of the vote, which is a huge step in the right direction, in my opinion, because in 2010 he was reelected with over 68% of the vote, so he took a big chunk out of them. I think that it was that radical budget that he came out with, the national spotlight of being on the ticket as the vice presidential nominee. A lot of people didn't like what they saw. So I decided to run again in 2014 because I wanted to build upon the great job we did in 2012, and I think we have a great opportunity to have the kind of voter turnout we need this fall to get rid of Paul Ryan with a great candidate like Mary Burke at the top of the ticket to drive that voter turnout. This is going to be a historic election. Everybody saw the latest Marquette Law School poll? Yep. Among likely voters, she's up by 1 now. Yeah. So that's great. Okay with you, I'm just going to go ahead and random pick out questions. So we will go through all of them. So the first question is, what is your position on letting women determine what they want to do with their bodies instead of the government? Great question. I think this is directly pertaining to choice. And, I am a pro-choice candidate. I believe that women should have control of her body like everybody else should have control over their own body and make their own healthcare decisions. I don't know if anybody wants to follow with that regarding anything specific about that. Yes, ma'am?
What can we do about it? If we talk about it, what can we do about it?
Get out and vote.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what you need to do. You need to make sure everybody is informed as to what the other party is trying to do with respect to taking away the woman's ability to have a choice in these matters. We risk a lot of these things if we don't get out and get involved and make sure that we're electing the people who stand for these things that we believe in. So, and this is, I don't think that when Roe v. Wade was settled with the Supreme Court, that I don't think anybody would have dreamed that so many years later we'd be fighting the same battles over again. And so it's kind of scary. I don't know if this is exactly how Southern people did, but I think you had bigger crowds. What do you think Paul Ryan is going, to accomplish with this? Oh, what do you think he's trying to accomplish with his poverty program? Well, I think this is pretty clear. I think we've seen from Paul Ryan's budget where his priorities are with respect to programs that help poor people. We've seen the discretionary funding cut at an alarming rate. We've seen what Scott Walker's been doing here, throwing people off of Badger Care, not accepting the expansion for Medicaid funds. The Republicans, I really firmly believe they don't feel that there's a genuine need for these programs. And anybody here who's familiar with my story knows that I was raised by a single parent who had to rely on home to get her kids fed. I mean, we ate government cheese as a child, or I did, my brother and my bunch of milk at school. I was only able to get an education because of things like Pell Grants and SAFE loans. So I understand the need for these programs and why they need to exist. You know, the government's cheese has now been rolled into the Women, Infants, and Children's program. SNAP is now food stamps. I think the amount of money that they were cutting out of these programs was just astonishing. And I think when most people were familiarized with the provisions in the Ryan budget, they couldn't believe that somebody would propose such drastic cuts to these programs of help. So, you know, when Ryan comes out with a poverty plan that is trying to bundle these programs into one block grant and then throwing that money at the state, he's actually creating a set of one plan that helps everybody across the nation. He's starting to throw money into an area where you're starting to create 50 different bureaucracies that all be handled differently and create all kinds of inequity. And that's the great thing about a program that is from the federal government. There's so many efficiencies that you gain from this, like Medicare. We know Medicare has the lowest delivery cost of healthcare than any other private system. So I think he's just kind of saying he's wanting to do something and actually doing another. Kind of like with his plan for Medicare, when he said, "Oh, we want to save it." How's he saving it? Privatizing it, making it a voucher program. That's not saving it. And I don't think that this is a good route to go with bundling all these programs and just paying for the block grant program. Anybody have any questions or follow-up to that? Yes, sir.
Do you think he's fueling his presidential ambitions with that kind of approach?
Personally, I do. I mean, I think it's, I think Congressman Ryan has been trying to position himself for a presidential run in 2016. I think we might get a little bit more insight to that when his book comes out and he's on his book tour. I think our congressman has very high aspirations and it's going to be shooting. I don't think this is the last stop. This one is from Frank. Sorry. I'm going to call you out on this one. Frank is asking if I will debate my primary opponent. Mr. Kalika says you have refused to debate him, and this is true. Mr. Kalika has made a last-minute request in our campaigns for debates. And my position is if Mr. Kalika was serious about having debates, this would have been addressed over 6 months ago when we first got involved in the campaign. And you know, my schedule is filled with events like this. Sunday I'm attending 2 churches and doing a bilingual listening session after that. And I've elected not to debate him. You know, Mary Burke is not debating her primary opponent. Paul Ryan is not debating Segway Jeremy Ryan, and I'm not debating Mr. Kalika. Do you need a follow-up with that, Frank?
So you couldn't find any date to debate him? A couple of weeks.
You know, Frank, it wasn't so much about trying to find a date, it's just that I don't feel it's my responsibility to accommodate his requests on a last-minute basis. You know, as Mr. Kalika's campaign was starting to have trouble and just realizing that he wasn't gaining any traction, his focus shifted from Paul Ryan to me and became extraordinarily negative. So I'm certainly not going to accommodate somebody who takes on that kind of a path.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Good.
Talked about. What would I fix with Obamacare? That's a good question. I think the Affordable Care Act, or what most people call Obamacare, is a great step in the right direction. You know, we took care of a lot of great things. You know, kids are able to stay on their parents' insurance until the age of 26. It did remove pre-existing conditions. It eliminated caps on care and what insurance companies have to pay to care for somebody. So these were all great steps in the right direction. What I would do and how I would improve upon it is I would still go in the direction of Medicare for all. I believe that this is where we have to eventually get to make sure that we are not paying 20% of our GDP into healthcare costs. We're all paying for it right now our whole working lives. We pay that contribution with your first paycheck to your last paycheck. Employers pay for it the whole time. And we can afford to do it because of the efficiencies we'll gain once everybody's into the system from cradle to grave. And we're paying for it. We might have to adjust that contribution a little bit to make sure that it's solid, but we can do this. And I'm saying this from a businessman's perspective. When I was running my businesses and I had 45 employees, I saw the greatest single expense I had was my healthcare costs. And I was providing my employees with the best top-notch health insurance plan that I could find. HMO, PPO, Blue Cross Blue Shield, executive plan insurance that had the highest coverages and most co-pays. And my employees weren't used to being treated fairly like this. They were dishwashers, line cooks, and didn't usually have good benefits. And I was so proud of that I talked about it every chance I got. I had 90% of my employees on it, and I subsidized it by 70% so they could afford it. Those who weren't on it usually got their coverage through their spouse. So I had all my employees covered. But the reason I advocate for Medicare for all is because as an employer, I was watching my healthcare costs go up year after year as high as 10, 12, sometimes 18%. And as a small business owner, that's not an expense you can budget for. It's really hard. I did it, I managed it, but it's extremely difficult. And I advocate for this for a businessman's perspective because Medicare is if you have everybody in it and everybody's participating in it, it'll be much stabler as far as costs to businesses. And it's also because we're paying such a high percentage of our GDP into this healthcare cost. We're having essentially one industry cannibalizing the profits from all the other industries. And this is holding us back internationally, making us less competitive internationally because our companies are paying a higher percentage into that cost than companies in other countries. So that's why I advocate for Medicare for all. And that's how I would use Obamacare, Affordable Care Act. Anybody need to follow up with that one or have questions about it?
You said payments might have to go up.
I'm sorry?
You go first. She had her hand
But it's the single payer system is what you prefer, what?
Yeah, some people call it the single-payer system. Some people call it Medicare for all. It's pretty much the same thing. Other countries employ different variations and some hybrid methods. Like they have private insurers and then a single-payer system. That's a German system. And I firmly believe as Americans, we can reverse engineer anything that's out there that works well, make it better for our own purposes, implement it, and improve upon it. But we got to have people who are willing to fight for that and do it. Frank, did you have something?
You said payments, what we contribute for Medicare might have to go up. You said adjust it. You mean go up?
Yeah. Sometimes you might have to adjust it, or it might come back down. It depends upon, I am familiar with the German system. I have family that lives over there. And because of the healthcare costs actually decreasing, everybody got a rebate check from paying into that program. So, you have to make it whole. You have to cover your costs and whatever that percentage needs to be. It wouldn't be as drastic as seeing 18% or 20% going up year after year. So the next question is, in regards to the Affordable Care Act, what can be done to hold the Republicans in Congress accountable? That's the first part. 2, what can be done above and beyond the Affordable Care Act to ensure every single American is covered? Well, that's Medicare for all. And what can we do to hold the Republicans in Congress accountable? I think those over 50 votes that they have taken to repeal the Affordable Care Act is just shameful. Because what you've essentially done by doing that is saying, we have voted 50 times to take away health care from every person who is in that program. And many of these people weren't getting coverage through their work, didn't have options to buy into the plans. And that's just, yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. We should have dogs in every listing. How can we fix Social Security? Great question. A lot of concern for people who are getting ready to retire. A lot of people dependent upon this. AARP did a great job in a magazine not too long ago. It was actually during the 2012 cycle, but they had, it was kind of like the Candyland map. You know, it's like, what do you want out of Social Security? Do you want to have higher benefits? What are you willing to give up? What are you willing to do for it? How do you make it whole? And you had these very different options. And two of the things that I felt would be reasonable was one, you scrap the cap. By that I mean you scrap the cap on people who earn over $113,000 don't pay into Social Security anymore. Which is, I mean, why should somebody be earning over $113,000 be taxed at a lower rate than somebody earning $45,000 or $50,000? So I think that's just wrong. I think you should all pay in the same amount. So by doing that, that goes a long way to making Social Security solvent. And if that were not enough, my position would be, I would advocate for adjusting the contribution again. If you need to make a small adjustment to the contribution, make sure that the program is safe and solvent, that's what I think is responsible. But it's so important these days. I know my mom is on Social Security, and it's hard for her. In fact, I send my mom, my wife and I support her in some ways, and I can't imagine how it would be for her if she didn't have that check coming. So it is critically important program for so many people in this country. So we need to do everything we can to protect that. I don't think privatizing is a good idea. Or putting it into the stock market. Somebody else who's in this race has advocated for that. We haven't had a congressman bring home jobs to Wisconsin since Les Aspin. What would I do to bring jobs back? Excellent question. And I'm asked all the time. Because what I'm finding when I do these listening sessions and I talk to people across the 1st Congressional District, everybody wants to know, where are the good paying jobs? Some of the things that I feel we need to do, I think we should make more investment in infrastructure. Because we have a lot of crumbling infrastructure in the 1st Congressional District. We can make that investment, put a lot of people back to work, and bring desperately needed money back into our economy. And those are good paying jobs. I mean, this is operator engineers, good union jobs, people who are earning a living wage. And then I also believe that we need fair trade deals as opposed to free trade deals. These bad trade deals like NAFTA and Canada that are, we're at a disadvantage because they don't have the same labor practices that we follow here in this country, and they don't follow the same environmental practices, and they're damaging their environment and exploiting workers. We need to go back and change those agreements, and then definitely not participate in something like the Trans-Pacific Partnership. How many people, is everybody here familiar with the TPP? Okay, you're right, it's pretty much, yeah, it's a bad deal, and this is taking away, I mean, these trade deals, they're taking away local control of what you can and cannot do. And it's giving so much power to corporations to dictate in international courts. Yes, ma'am?
Why is the president supporting it?
That is a good question, and I cannot answer that. I think he's on the wrong side of this issue. That's my personal position and belief. If he calls up intelligence shares, I'll be sure to let you know. Yes. Will I fight for unions in Congress? Yes. I don't know if I can. Does somebody want to follow up with that, specifically what I mean, or what you are wanting to know specifically about? Anybody got that?
Well, it's not my question, but I'm thinking, when we talk about fighting for unions, are we talking about unions in the traditional sense,
Yeah, how many people here are familiar with what happened in Chattanooga, Tennessee with the VW plant? Okay. This is a good example of what's happening in other parts around the world. Yeah, well, VW has a very progressive management structure where labor is one of the stakeholders and decision makers for the company. And in every one of their plants, they have representation. So labor is at the table with management deciding what will happen and what won't happen. Well, what happened in Chattanooga was, and because that's the only plant where labor was not represented that VW has. So the UAW, Bob King was working with them, trying to organize, and they put it to vote, and the union lost. And VW didn't know what to do because they wanted to bring a new line, the Jetta line, I think, or something, or expand the line to maybe a small SUV. I can't remember which vehicle it was. But they had gotten to a point where they said, look, if we're not going to have a structure we're familiar with, we're not going to expand this plant. So they finally came to an agreement where they are going to have representation, have somebody at the table, and they're going to start producing another vehicle there. But that's the kind of stuff that has to happen everywhere around the country. I mean, we can't have our protections for workers start to slide, and that's exactly what's going to happen if we don't have a union, regarding safety issues and collective bargaining rights. We've seen what happens here in Wisconsin. And I'm convinced if Scott Walker gets reelected, the first thing he's going to sign is going to be making Wisconsin the right to work state. Yeah. So we need to figure out ways that we can work together, stand together, and make sure that we are not slipping backwards with protections for workers in this country, that we stand together and stick together and fight for that. So, yes, sir.
Follow up on it. We were just up north over the weekend, and currently Walker's trying to privatize the maintenance staff at UW Superior because he thinks he can get away with it. That nobody knows what's going on in Superior, and they're looking for supposedly going out for bids, and the union is going to get a chance to bid on retaining their jobs. Was the way I got
Was on the Duluth News.
on the news from Duluth.
Yeah.
So be aware of the fact that wherever you are, if you work for the state or the university, he's after you.
Can we just add right to work for less?
Right to work for less. Yes, Dave.
I don't think, Rob, enough people realize or understand, I hope enough they don't, that a right to work state, what that is if you work in a union shop, you don't have to pay the union dues and belong to the union, but the union has to represent you, and that's wrong.
Yeah, you get all the benefits, but don't have to pay for it.
Correct.
Yeah. It's true. Did anybody catch the AP article? Was it AP? I'm pretty sure it was AP that said of the 13 states that had implemented a higher minimum wage on their own fared better with job creation and economic recovery than the 37 that didn't.
Yeah.
It's kind of telling, isn't it? Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say that I work at one of the UW colleges, and there's lots of rumors going on about unionizing various aspects of the college's maintenance, library, bookstore, and so on.
Privatizing.
And there's some resistance, but we're not making any decisions either.
Well, a lot of people have forgotten how important unions are and what they've done for us over time. It just got complacent and forgotten. And just think that that's all going to be there forever. It's just kind of like the right to choose. If you're not active and involved in fighting for these things on a daily basis, they will take them away. It's like with money in politics. That's one of the first things that I would fight for in Washington is get the money out of our political process, because corporations are not people. Money is not speech. And that is destroying our democracy and drowning out all of our voices.
But I also want to add that because we're all being, the institutions of higher learning are being squeezed for money. meat is, for example, you get some private maintenance firm where they pay people $8.98 an hour and there's no benefits, you know, it's cheaper than having the state workers.
And also asking teachers to teach another class without additional pay.
That's right.
I mean,
They can buy their own supplies, like
Yeah.
teachers.
yeah, and this is, and this frankly bolsters their narrative of public education, public institutions don't work. If you start taking away the funding, you drive away good quality people who care, and you know, you're not providing the same quality because your working conditions have gotten so poor that you can't recruit good people or they leave. I mean, we all heard the stories about how many years of experience left the DNR and other departments after Act 10 came through because people were afraid of what was going to happen or come down towards them if they didn't leave that, because they had good things in place that they could take advantage of, but they weren't sure if it was going to be there the next year. When you create that kind of uncertainty, that's when you drive your economy backwards. And that's what happened here in Wisconsin.